in the deep cradle of southeastern Anatolia, long before the rise of writing, long before pharaohs carved their names into stone, long before the first bricks of ancient Mesopotamia were ever laid, a small hill stood quietly above the plains. It was an unremarkable mound, windswept and chalky, its limestone scattered with the remnants of long-extinct animals and forgotten seasons. For thousands of years, the people living in the surrounding villages and farms had no idea that beneath their feet lay one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of all time, Göbekli Tepe. Today we look at ancient history through a familiar lens. We imagine it as a steady climb from simple to complex, from primitive hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, to city builders, to the vast empires that shaped our world. But Göbekli Tepe breaks that pattern completely. It doesn't merely challenge our timelines, it shatters them. It stands as a monument, built at a time when humans were not supposed to be capable of such engineering, such organization, or such spiritual imagination. And yet, through the stones raised by unknown hands 12,000 years ago, we hear a whisper: "You have underestimated us." To understand why Göbekli Tepe shouldn't exist, why its very presence is a paradox, we have to return to the end of the last ice age. The world was colder, harsher. Vast glaciers blanketed enormous parts of the planet. The people alive at that time were not farmers, they were not builders. They were nomads, moving with the seasons, following animals, living in small groups, and struggling for survival. They had no cities, no pottery, no metal tools, and certainly no monumental architecture. According to everything we believed, they should not have had the ability to quarry massive stones, shape them with precision, transport them over long distances, erect them in perfect circles, and decorate them with symbolic carvings that speak of gods, spirits, and forgotten myths. But Göbekli Tepe exists, and it forces us to reconsider who our ancient ancestors really were. Picture for a moment what life might have been like for those early people. They lived in a raw, unforgiving world. Their days were dictated by the needs of survival: hunting, gathering, tracking, sheltering, and protecting their children. They did not have the comforts that would come later. No agriculture meant no storage, no stable villages, no surplus food, and no specialization of labor. Every member of the group had to contribute directly to staying alive. There was no room for master builders or full-time artisans, or so we thought. Yet, at Göbekli Tepe, thousands of years before the pyramids of Egypt, before Stonehenge, before the earliest Sumerian temples, someone carved massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, standing over 5 meters tall. These stones were arranged in circular enclosures with astonishing care. Each pillar was smoothed, shaped, and positioned with an architectural understanding we typically associate with far later civilizations. And then there are the carvings: foxes, snakes, wild boars, birds, scorpions, lions, creatures rendered with such skill that they reveal not just artistic ability, but an intimate spiritual relationship between humans and the natural world. What kind of society could have built this? The discovery of Göbekli Tepe in the 1990s by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt changed everything. Schmidt recognized immediately that the site was not a simple village, nor an early farm, nor a domestic settlement of any kind. This was something different, something monumental. The sheer scale of the architecture suggested a purpose beyond survival. It suggested ritual. It suggested ceremony. It suggested a place where people gathered in numbers far exceeding the population of a typical hunter-gatherer band. Imagine groups of people, perhaps hundreds or thousands, coming from distant valleys and mountains, bringing gifts, offerings, meat, fruits, flints, and tools. Imagine them working together to raise those towering stones, to carve them, to shape them into a sacred space. This was not the work of a small group. This was the work of a culture, and that realization changes everything we thought we knew about human development. For decades, archaeologists believed that religion and monumental architecture emerged only after agriculture. It made sense. Once people settled in one place, they could accumulate food, develop leaders, organize labor, and create large communal buildings. But Göbekli Tepe flips that script. It suggests that it may have been the other way around, that spirituality and monumental gathering places may have come first, inspiring people to gather in larger groups, to share knowledge, to develop organized cooperation, and ultimately to invent agriculture. If that is true, religion didn't emerge because of cities. Cities emerged, at least partly, because of religion. This single idea rewrites the story of civilization. Now imagine approaching Göbekli Tepe in its prime. The air is warm, the wind sweeping across the plains. Small groups of people emerge from different directions, families carrying baskets of berries, hunters dragging game, elders leaning on wooden staffs. They converge at the base of the hill where the stone circles rise from the earth like the ribs of some ancient giant. As they climb, they see the pillars gleaming in the sunlight, their carvings alive with shadows. Inside each enclosure, two central pillars dominate the space, towering T-shaped monoliths facing each other as if in eternal conversation. Around them, smaller pillars form a ring, each one carved with animals that likely held deep symbolic meaning. These animals were not random. They were chosen with intention. Some scholars believe they represent constellations, forming an early celestial map. Others think they were spiritual guardians or totemic beings connected to the rituals performed there. And then there is the most intriguing feature. The T-shape of the pillars might represent stylized human figures. On some, you can see arms carved along the sides, hands meeting at the front, and belts with ornate patterns. These are not mere stones. They may be gods, ancestors, or mythic beings standing watch over the ceremonies. The people gathered here probably didn't stay long-term. Göbekli Tepe shows no sign of permanent residence. There are no homes, no hearths, no trash piles, typical of a living settlement. This suggests the site was ceremonial, a place of pilgrimage. It raises the question, what drew people here? What belief system was strong enough, powerful enough, to inspire such devotion from peoples scattered across vast territories? We may never know the exact rituals performed at Göbekli Tepe, but we can sense their magnitude. When people gathered here, they weren't just surviving. They were creating meaning. They were forging identity. They were building a shared sense of the world. And the stones still whisper that story across 12 millennia. What makes Göbekli Tepe even more mysterious is that after centuries of use, the people who built it deliberately buried it. They covered the stone circles with earth, layer by layer, carefully, intentionally. This wasn't abandonment. This was closure. It was as if they believed the site had fulfilled its purpose, or that sealing it was part of a ritual. Or perhaps that protecting it meant leaving it for the future. Then the place was forgotten. Thousands of years passed. New civilizations rose and fell nearby. The Hittites, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Romans, but Göbekli Tepe slept beneath the earth, untouched, its secrets preserved. When archaeologists finally uncovered the first pillars, the world wasn't ready for what they found. The dating shook the foundations of our knowledge. 10,000 years old, then older, 11,000, and finally 12,000 years, a structure so ancient that it predates pottery, metallurgy, written language, and the Neolithic Revolution itself. It predates agriculture by 2,000 years. It predates Stonehenge by 6,500 years. It predates the Great Pyramid of Giza by 7,000 years. And yet, it is more complex than either. This is why Göbekli Tepe shouldn't exist. Not because it is impossible, but because it forces us to admit that the capabilities of our ancestors have been vastly underestimated. These people were not simple. They were not primitive. They had knowledge, astronomical, architectural, artistic, and spiritual, that we have not fully understood. The more we excavate, the more questions emerge. Some pillars show signs of alignment with celestial bodies. Some suggest seasonal gatherings connected to solstices or equinoxes. Others appear to encode myths, stories of creation, destruction, and rebirth. The carvings of predators and prey may symbolize cosmic cycles or mythological battles. The animals might represent clans, tribes, or spirits, invoked during rituals. And here is a question that keeps archaeologists awake at night. How did hunter-gatherers organize the labor needed to build something of this scale? The stones had to be quarried, lifted, carved, and transported without wheels, without beasts of burden, without metal, and without permanent settlements. To do that, you need planning, you need leadership, you need shared purpose and social cohesion. You need some form of hierarchy or coordination. This suggests that proto-civilizations, early forms of complex societies, may have existed long before we thought. Göbekli Tepe is not just old, it is advanced. And yet, we have excavated less than 10% of the site. Beneath the earth lie dozens more enclosures waiting to be discovered. The buried depths of Göbekli Tepe could hold secrets that rewrite human history even further, perhaps revealing new symbols, new structures, new understandings of how humanity first came together, not just to survive, but to dream. When we look at the world today, it is easy to take civilization for granted. We wake up in houses built by countless unnamed workers. We flip switches that illuminate rooms, power devices, and connect us to information across the planet. We walk through cities carved by machines, guided by complex geometry and advanced engineering. Everything around us seems like the inevitable result of a long, linear progression of human capability. But when we turn our eyes back 12,000 years to Göbekli Tepe, we find a story far less linear, far more mysterious, and infinitely more humbling. Göbekli Tepe tells us that human intelligence, creativity, and spiritual yearning did not suddenly appear with agriculture or writing. These qualities were already alive, burning fiercely, thousands of years before the first crops were planted. The people who built this site were not waiting for civilization to evolve. They were already shaping their world, driven by a vision we struggle to understand even now. When the first archaeologists uncovered the stone rings, they immediately realized that the builders possessed an extraordinary understanding of stoneworking. The limestone pillars were not rough or crude. They were expertly carved, their edges smooth, their surfaces meticulously worked with flint tools. The T-shape itself was not a natural form. It was intentional, symmetrical, and consistent across multiple structures. To achieve this level of precision, the builders needed advanced knowledge. How to quarry stone from bedrock, how to shape it, how to balance and transport multi-ton pieces, and most importantly, how to erect them so they would stand for millennia. This required coordinated labor and long-term planning, qualities we traditionally associate with settled agricultural societies. Yet Göbekli Tepe was built before agriculture existed. This contradiction is one of the greatest puzzles in archaeology. It forces us to consider that our ancestors might have developed forms of cooperation and organization that left no obvious archaeological trace. It challenges the assumption that farming is a prerequisite for large-scale projects, perhaps the desire to gather, to worship, and to build something greater than themselves was powerful enough to draw groups together seasonally, not permanently, but regularly enough to sustain a monumental enterprise. This idea transforms our understanding of early human societies. It paints a picture not of isolated bands struggling for survival, but of interconnected groups capable of communicating across distances, sharing knowledge, and cooperating on a scale previously unimaginable. Imagine the conversations that might have taken place as people approached Göbekli Tepe. Imagine hunters from distant forests meeting gatherers from across wide plains. Imagine them exchanging stories, foods, tools, and ideas. For many of them, this sacred hill might have been the only place where they encountered others beyond their immediate group. It was a crossroads, a spiritual hub, and perhaps even a place where early mythologies were shaped. In that sense, Göbekli Tepe may have played a crucial role in the development of human identity. It was a place where symbolic thinking, the ability to imagine invisible forces, to give meaning to life and death, to conceptualize gods or spirits, found physical expression in stone. The act of carving animals and deities into pillars was not merely decoration. It was communication. It was an early form of storytelling, conveying beliefs that the community shared. Some researchers believe that the animal carvings might represent clans or tribes, each associated with a specific creature. Others propose that they represent protective spirits or totemic figures invoked during rituals. Still others suggest the carvings might hold astronomical significance, that the builders recognized patterns in the stars and encoded them into the pillars as a celestial map. For example, the famous vulture stone at Göbekli Tepe shows a large bird holding a circular object alongside scorpions and other animals. Some scholars believe this represents constellations and celestial events like meteor showers or even the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. If this interpretation is true, then Göbekli Tepe is not only a temple, it is an ancient observatory, a place where people studied the sky long before the first written calendars. But whether the carvings were symbolic, spiritual, astronomical, or all of the above, one thing is clear. The builders of Göbekli Tepe possessed an intellectual and artistic sophistication that defies our expectations of hunter-gatherer societies. Their tools were simple, but their vision was complex. Their technology may have been limited, but their imagination was vast. This paradox lies at the heart of Göbekli Tepe's mystery. How did people living in what we assume was a primitive era create something that reflects such an advanced understanding of the world? To explore that question, we must consider the possibility that the people of this era had social structures we have yet to fully comprehend. They may have had temporary leaders, charismatic individuals who inspired others to work together. They may have had spiritual specialists, early shamans or priests who guided rituals and directed the construction of sacred spaces. They may have held seasonal gatherings that grew into large-scale events, where hundreds of people gathered to worship, celebrate, and build. In this scenario, Göbekli Tepe becomes the physical manifestation of a shared belief system. It becomes the heart of a network of mobile groups who returned year after year, generation after generation, to continue the work their ancestors began. This continuity suggests that the people held deep reverence for the site. They were not building shelters. They were building symbols of identity, community, and meaning. But what makes Göbekli Tepe even more astonishing is the deliberate burial of the site. The enclosures were not abandoned and left to decay naturally. They were intentionally filled in with earth, stones, and debris, layer by layer. This burial was carefully done, almost ritualistic. It suggests that the builders were not simply leaving the site behind. They were sealing it, closing a chapter of their history. Why would they do this? Was the site considered sacred in a way that required it to be protected? Were the rituals performed there no longer relevant to their evolving society? Or was the burial part of a cyclical process? Perhaps each enclosure was used for a certain period, then closed and replaced with a new one nearby. One theory suggests that as the people of the region transitioned toward agriculture, their cultural and spiritual needs changed. The communal gatherings that once defined their lives might have become less frequent. The development of farming brought new priorities: settled life, territorial boundaries, resource management. The massive gatherings once held at Göbekli Tepe may have become impractical or unnecessary. If this is true, then Göbekli Tepe marks a turning point in human history, a moment where spirituality and communal identity began to transform, as society itself changed. It may represent the last great monument of a purely hunter-gatherer world, created before agriculture reshaped the human experience. To walk among the excavated pillars today is to walk in the footsteps of a lost world, a world of rituals we cannot decipher, beliefs we cannot reconstruct, and customs we can only imagine. Yet the stones speak. They speak through their carvings, through their arrangement, through their presence. They speak of a people who understood the world not as survival alone, but as a stage for meaning, connection, and transcendence. As archaeologists continue to uncover new sections of the site, the story becomes even more complex. Beneath the already unearthed layers lie older, deeper enclosures, some even larger, some containing pillars that dwarf those above them. This suggests that the site was used for centuries, perhaps millennia, with each generation contributing to its evolution. The deeper layers could reveal even older symbolic systems, even more intricate carvings, or architectural designs we have yet to imagine. And yet, despite its global fame today, Göbekli Tepe remains only partially excavated. Less than 10% of the site has been uncovered. The majority remains hidden beneath soil that protected it for thousands of years. What lies beneath could redefine everything we think we know about early human civilization. Some believe we may find evidence of advanced knowledge, perhaps early mathematics, astronomy, or symbolic systems that predate writing. Others speculate that we might discover entirely new forms of ritual architecture, revealing traditions lost in the mists of time. And some wonder whether Göbekli Tepe is just one piece of a larger network of ancient sites, connected spiritually or culturally across vast distances. What makes these possibilities so exciting is that Göbekli Tepe stands at the edge of our understanding. It exists in a time when humans were supposed to be simple, but instead, they proved themselves capable of extraordinary feats. It challenges the narrative of linear progress and reminds us that our ancestors were not waiting for the right time to become intelligent. They already were. They lacked our tools, but they possessed creativity, skill, organization, and ambition. Göbekli Tepe is a reminder that history is not a straight line. It is a mosaic, full of forgotten chapters, lost innovations, and moments of brilliance that vanish into the winds of time. And as we continue to uncover the stones of this ancient sanctuary, we are not merely exploring a site, we are rediscovering ourselves, our origins, our capabilities, our shared human story. Göbekli Tepe forces us to ask new questions. How much have we forgotten? How much lies beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered? And how many assumptions about the past are waiting to be rewritten as we unearth the next layer? The world that surrounded Göbekli Tepe 12,000 years ago was utterly different from the landscapes we know today. Vast herds of wild gazelles roamed across open plains. Lions, leopards, and hyenas prowled the hills. Massive flocks of birds migrated overhead, creating spectacles in the sky that must have seemed like divine choreography. Rivers flowed more freely. Forests stretched farther, and the climate, though shifting, still held traces of the last ice age's chill. It was a world filled with danger, mystery, and constant change. For the people living then, every day was a negotiation with nature. Yet amid this raw, unpredictable world, humans found the time, skill, and spiritual drive to construct Göbekli Tepe. This fact alone suggests that the society responsible for this site was not merely reactive. They were not overwhelmed by the pressures of survival. Instead, they were proactive, intentional, visionary. They sought to shape the world around them, to create something enduring and meaningful. This raises profound questions. What drove them? What compelled a group of hunter-gatherers who depended entirely on mobility and flexibility to invest their labor in a permanent stone sanctuary? Why here? Why this hill, this landscape, this moment in time? One possible answer is that Göbekli Tepe occupied a central position in their cosmology. It may have been more than a physical location. It may have been a spiritual axis, a place where the earthly and the divine intersected. Many ancient cultures believed that certain mountains or hills were sacred, representing the dwelling places of gods or ancestors. Göbekli Tepe's elevated position gave it natural prominence, offering a commanding view of the surrounding plains. From this vantage point, the builders could observe animal migrations, weather patterns, and celestial events. It is possible that the hill was chosen because it felt like a bridge between the heavens and the earth, a place where rituals could connect humans to cosmic cycles. The builders likely saw the world in symbolic terms. Every animal, every star, every change in season carried meaning. The carvings found on the pillars support this idea. They depict animals not randomly, but deliberately, each with care, each with specificity. These creatures may have represented forces of nature, protective spirits, or mythological beings. They may have served as guides in rituals meant to ensure fertility, protection, or cosmic harmony. Consider the fox, a recurring figure in the carvings. In many cultures, the fox represents cunning, transformation, or liminality, the spaces between worlds. The snakes carved into certain pillars could represent rebirth, as snakes shed their skins, or they might symbolize dangers lurking in the unseen world. Birds may have been messengers between earth and sky, guiding souls or carrying prayers to the heavens. These interpretations are speculative, yet the consistency and artistry of the carvings indicate that the symbols were meaningful to the people who made them. They were not decorative, they were deliberate. This level of symbolic thinking suggests that the community had a developed mythological framework, a complex set of stories, beliefs, and rituals that gave meaning to their lives. These myths may have been passed down orally for generations, evolving over time. Göbekli Tepe might have been the physical stage on which these stories were enacted. Imagine a ritual taking place inside one of the stone enclosures. The central pillars rise like silent guardians. Fires crackle at the edges of the circle, casting flickering shadows across the carved animals. A group of people gathers. Men, women, children, elders. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and herbs. A spiritual leader steps forward, perhaps wearing the skin of an animal, perhaps painted with symbols representing the forces invoked in the ceremony. Chants begin, deep, rhythmic, echoing against the stone. The sound vibrates through the enclosure, merging the voices of the living with the silent carvings of the ancient creatures. The ritual might honor a hunt, celebrate a seasonal change, mourn a death, or mark a rite of passage. It might seek to ensure good fortune or to appease unseen spirits. Whatever the purpose, the event would have been deeply emotional, connecting the participants to each other and to their ancestors. This communal experience reinforced identity. It strengthened social bonds. It created shared memory. Through repeated rituals, the people forged a collective story, a narrative that transcended individual lives and gave meaning to the entire group. Göbekli Tepe became the focal point of this narrative. It became a sacred anchor in a nomadic world. This leads to one of the most intriguing theories about the site, that seasonal gatherings at Göbekli Tepe may have laid the groundwork for the development of agriculture itself. When large groups of people gathered at the site, they needed food, lots of it. Hunting alone may not have been enough to support these events. Some archaeologists believe that the demand for food may have encouraged people to experiment with cultivating wild grains nearby. Over time, these experiments may have evolved into deliberate planting, agriculture. If this is true, then the ritual gatherings at Göbekli Tepe were not just spiritual events. They were catalysts for one of the most transformative developments in human history, farming, which eventually led to settled life, cities, writing, and civilization, may have begun as a practical response to religious gatherings. This interpretation flips the traditional story of human progress on its head. Instead of agriculture giving rise to religion, religion may have given rise to agriculture. This possibility is profound. It suggests that human spirituality, the need for connection, meaning, and ritual, was a driving force in shaping the world we know today. It suggests that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were not merely responding to their environment, they were reshaping it. But while these theories are compelling, they also highlight how little we truly know. The absence of written records from this era means we must interpret stones, bones, seeds, and tools. These fragments hint at a complex society, but they do not tell the whole story. Much of what we imagine remains speculative. Yet even with these uncertainties, Göbekli Tepe's significance is undeniable. Archaeologists have also noted the absence of domestic structures at the site. There are no houses, no storage rooms, no hearths. The people who built Göbekli Tepe did not live there permanently. This reinforces the idea that it was a ceremonial center, not a village. The layout of the enclosures further supports this interpretation. Each one is carefully designed with two central pillars facing each other. The surrounding pillars form a perfect circle. This arrangement may represent a cosmological model, a symbolic universe. The central pillars could represent deities, ancestors, or cosmic forces, while the surrounding ones might represent clans, tribes, or protective spirits. In this sense, entering the enclosure was not a casual act. It was a journey into a symbolic world. Participants stepped from the mundane into the sacred, from the physical into the spiritual. The architectural precision of these enclosures is remarkable. The builders understood geometry, balance, and weight distribution. They positioned the pillars with great care, likely using ropes, levers, and wooden scaffolding. They worked with a vision that required planning across seasons, perhaps even across generations. And then there is the question of how they transported the stones. Without wheels or animals, they likely used manpower, dragging the stones on sledges or rolling them on logs. The effort required was immense. It speaks to a level of social organization that contradicts traditional views of hunter-gatherer societies. These people communicated, they cooperated, they planned. They imagined a future, one where the stones they raised would stand long after they were gone. And indeed, they did stand, until the builders themselves buried them. The deliberate burial of the enclosures remains one of Göbekli Tepe's most perplexing mysteries. It suggests that the site had a life cycle. It was used, revered, and then intentionally closed. Perhaps each enclosure represented a particular era or generation. When that era ended, the people buried the enclosure and built a new one nearby. This would reflect a cyclical view of time, a belief in renewal, transformation, and continuity. Or perhaps the burial was meant to protect the site. Maybe it was an act of reverence, preserving the sacred stones for the ancestors or for future generations. Whatever the reason, the burial preserved the site almost perfectly. It shielded the carvings from erosion, allowing them to survive for 12 millennia. This preservation gives us a rare window into a world long gone. A world where humans lived in harmony with nature, yet possessed the ambition to create something monumental. As we continue to uncover the buried enclosures, the story deepens. Some of the oldest structures lie beneath the already excavated ones. These deeper layers date back even farther, perhaps to the very beginnings of human symbolic culture. The thought that even older, more mysterious structures lie waiting beneath the earth is thrilling. It suggests that what we see today is only a fraction of the full story. Göbekli Tepe challenges our assumptions at every turn. It tells us that our ancestors were capable of extraordinary feats long before the rise of civilization. It reminds us that human creativity is ancient, far older than we imagined. It suggests that the roots of our spiritual and symbolic traditions run far deeper than the written record. And perhaps most importantly, it invites us to explore the unknown, to question what we think we know, to push beyond the boundaries of established narratives, and to embrace the possibility that the past is far more complex, far more mysterious, and far more inspiring than we ever believed. The story of Göbekli Tepe becomes even more fascinating when we consider the people themselves, not just what they built, but who they were as human beings. These were individuals living at the end of the Pleistocene, a time marked by profound environmental shifts. The last ice age was drawing to a close. Temperatures were rising. Glaciers were retreating. New plants were growing in once frozen lands. Animals were migrating into new territories. The entire biosphere was in transition. For the humans of that era, this transition was both an opportunity and a challenge. Their traditional hunting patterns were disrupted. The availability of food fluctuated. New animals appeared, others vanished. Weather patterns shifted unpredictably. Such upheaval required adaptability, intelligence, and cooperation. These people were not primitive. They were resilient, resourceful, and extraordinarily attuned to the natural world. They lived in small, mobile bands, typically composed of extended family groups. Their lives were intimately connected to the rhythms of the land. They knew the behaviors of animals, the flowering of plants, the cycles of the moon. They understood the landscapes they moved through with a depth that few modern people can imagine. Their survival depended on this knowledge. And yet, even in the midst of such a demanding existence, they carved out time to create, to gather, to build. This tells us something profound about human nature, that the need for meaning, for spirituality, for community, is as ancient as our need for food and shelter. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not simply reacting to nature's challenges. They were engaging with the deeper questions of existence. They were asking who they were, where they came from, and what forces shaped their world. The construction of Göbekli Tepe cannot be understood without appreciating the social dynamics of the time. These people lived in groups small enough to remain mobile, but large enough to sustain complex social bonds. They likely had elders who held knowledge passed down over generations. They had storytellers who preserved myths. They had skilled carvers who understood stone. They had people who specialized in tool-making, hunting strategies, and ritual practices. This specialization challenges the notion that hunter-gatherer societies lacked division of labor. While it's true that agricultural societies later developed more formalized roles, the builders of Göbekli Tepe clearly had the capacity to identify individuals with specific skills and assign them particular tasks. Some carved, some excavated, some hauled stone, some prepared food, some led rituals. This level of coordination implies leadership. Not necessarily kings or chiefs, but influential individuals, perhaps shamans, experienced hunters, or elders with deep spiritual insight. These leaders would have needed to inspire trust, motivate others, and organize large-scale projects. They weren't ruling with force. They were guiding through respect, tradition, and shared belief. At Göbekli Tepe, every stone bears the imprint of human hands, hands that shaped, lifted, and placed with purpose. Consider the physical effort required. Imagine a group of 20 or 30 people dragging a 5-ton pillar across uneven terrain using ropes made from plants or animal hides. Their feet dig into the dirt. Their bodies strain with the weight, sweat dripping in the heat of the sun. They communicate with shouts, gestures, rhythm. When the stone reaches its designated place, they must raise it, a task requiring ingenuity. They dig a deep pit, position the base, and use levers or earthen ramps to tilt the stone upright. When it finally stands, there is celebration, cheers, songs, rituals of gratitude. This is human cooperation at its finest. This is creativity meeting determination. This is civilization in its embryonic form. The people who built Göbekli Tepe didn't think of themselves as primitive. They saw themselves as part of a living world, animated by spirits, forces, and mystery. In this worldview, raising stones was not construction, it was communion. Each pillar was a bridge between the seen and the unseen. Each carving was a message, a prayer, a symbol of cosmic order. The survival of these carvings is itself extraordinary. They are not random scratches. They are intricate, deliberate, meaningful. The level of detail is astonishing. The feathers on birds, the muscles on predators, the curves of snakes, all carved with flint tools. Such precision requires patience, skill, and artistic ability. It also requires time, hours, days, perhaps weeks or months spent on a single pillar. Those who carved these symbols were artists in the truest sense, channeling cultural memory into stone. One of the most iconic carvings at Göbekli Tepe is the depiction of a pair of stylized hands folded on the front of a central pillar. This carving is subtle yet powerful. It suggests that these pillars represent anthropomorphic beings, not just stones, but figures endowed with identity or spirit. Perhaps they were ancestors. Perhaps they were gods. Perhaps they were mythic heroes whose stories shaped the culture. The central pillars in each enclosure stand facing each other as if locked in eternal dialogue. Some researchers believe this symbolizes duality, life and death, earth and sky, masculine and feminine, or the interplay of cosmic forces. Such duality is common in ancient cosmologies across the world, suggesting that humanity's symbolic thinking evolved far earlier than previously thought. The circular arrangement of the pillars may represent unity or wholeness. Circles have long been associated with cycles, seasons, life, death, rebirth. The people who built Göbekli Tepe likely saw time not as a straight line, but as a repeating pattern. Their rituals may have reflected this cycle, marking transitions from one season to the next, one generation to the next, one spiritual phase to another. Beyond the symbolism, the engineering of these enclosures is remarkable. The pillars are set into carefully carved bedrock sockets. The walls are made of stone blocks fitted with precision. The floors are polished limestone. This level of craftsmanship suggests repeated practice, a tradition of building that may extend far beyond what we have discovered. It raises the possibility that Göbekli Tepe had predecessors, earlier sites now lost to time, eroded by weather, or buried beneath layers of sediment. If so, Göbekli Tepe may represent the culmination of an architectural tradition, not its beginning. This idea is supported by the discovery of similar, though smaller sites in the region, Karahantepe, Sefertepe, and others. These sites share some architectural features with Göbekli Tepe, suggesting a network of ritual centers across southeastern Anatolia. They may have been connected culturally or spiritually, forming a constellation of sacred places used by different groups. This network hints at something even more profound: early regional identity. These people were not isolated tribes. They interacted, traded, intermarried, and shared beliefs. Their rituals may have created bonds across distances, fostering alliances and cultural coherence. Göbekli Tepe might have served as the central hub of this network, the spiritual heart of an entire region. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe forces us to confront the idea that the builders understood their own permanence and impermanence. They knew that the site had served its purpose. They knew that future generations would move in different directions. Perhaps they sensed that the transition to agriculture would reshape their world. Perhaps they believed that burying the stones would preserve their power, protect their spirits, or fulfill a cosmic cycle. Whatever their reasons, the act of burial was not one of abandonment. It was an act of reverence, a ceremonial closing of a chapter. Layer by layer, they filled the enclosures with earth and debris. This was not haphazard dumping. It was deliberate, orderly, and symbolic. The final covering sealed the site, preserving it for millennia. And so Göbekli Tepe slept, hidden beneath the earth, while humanity transformed. Agriculture spread, villages grew, cities rose, writing emerged, empires flourished and fell, religions spread, kingdoms fought, technology advanced, entire civilizations came and went. Yet Göbekli Tepe remained untouched, waiting. When Klaus Schmidt rediscovered the site in the 1990s, he opened a door not just to an ancient sanctuary, but to a forgotten chapter of the human story. His work revealed that our understanding of the past was incomplete. It forced us to recognize that the origins of symbolism, spirituality, and architectural ambition lie far deeper in time than we once believed. As excavations continue, each new layer brings new questions. The deeper enclosures appear even older, even more enigmatic. Some pillars have carvings unlike anything found above. Some appear to represent scenes, narratives carved in stone. These scenes may depict mythological stories now lost. They may represent early attempts at recording events or transmitting cultural memory. The idea that these early hunter-gatherers created narrative art, a precursor to writing, is astonishing. It challenges the very definition of civilization. It suggests that the human mind was capable of symbolic storytelling long before the invention of script. The question arises, how much knowledge have we lost? How many early innovations disappeared because they left no durable trace? Stone is rare. Much early symbolism may have been painted on wood, drawn in sand, or sung in ritual performances. These ephemeral expressions are lost to time, but their echoes survive in the stones of Göbekli Tepe. What makes Göbekli Tepe truly awe-inspiring is the realization that it represents not a starting point, but a midpoint. It stands at the crossroads of human evolution, between the old world of nomadic life and the new world of agriculture and settlement. It captures a moment when humanity stood on the threshold of transformation. Not yet farmers, not yet city builders, but already creators of monumental architecture and complex cosmology. Göbekli Tepe is a message from the deep past, a reminder that the human desire to understand the universe, to seek meaning, to create symbols and to build together is as ancient as our species itself. It is a testament to our ancestors' brilliance, endurance, and imagination. It is a whisper across 12 millennia, telling us that the roots of civilization lie not in technology, but in the human spirit. As we continue examining the mysteries woven into the stones of Göbekli Tepe, we must confront one of the most puzzling aspects of the site: the sense of intentional sophistication found not only in the carving of the pillars, but in the entire spatial logic of the complex. The more archaeologists excavate, the clearer it becomes that this was never a random gathering of stones, never a simple congregation point arranged casually by wandering tribes. Instead, everything from the placement of the enclosures to the orientation of the T-shaped pillars reflects a deliberate and advanced architectural vision. A vision that should not, by every traditional timeline of human capability, have existed 12,000 years ago. This intentionality points to something most people rarely consider: the mindset required to build something like Göbekli Tepe. These people were not simply reacting to their environment. They were projecting an idea into the future. They were planning. And that concept, true long-term planning, has always been associated with societies already stabilized by agriculture, surplus food, and structured leadership. But here, at Göbekli Tepe, we have the reverse: planning before farming, monuments before settlements, architecture before agriculture. It raises a question so profound that it shakes the foundations of anthropology. What if the human desire to build monuments, to create sacred spaces, was not a byproduct of civilization, but one of its catalysts? Imagine a group of hunter-gatherers gathering not because they had settled down, but because they wanted to come together to build something meaningful, something greater than themselves, something that required coordination, cooperation, and shared purpose. In pursuing this shared act, they may have discovered the need to stay longer in one place. They may have realized the advantage of cultivating small patches of wild cereals. They may have experimented with domesticating animals not out of necessity, but out of the desire to maintain a stable and organized community around their sacred site. In this scenario, Göbekli Tepe doesn't just defy history, it rewrites the story entirely. Instead of agriculture leading to monuments, monuments may have led to agriculture. Instead of civilization enabling religion, religion may have sparked civilization. This inversion of the traditional narrative is one of the most powerful and controversial implications of Göbekli Tepe, but even this is just the beginning. Because as more enclosures were discovered, each one buried purposefully beneath layers of soil, another question emerged. Why bury them? Why, after so much effort spent in creation, would the builders then expend equal effort to entomb their own masterpiece? Some researchers believe that each enclosure may have served its purpose and was then ritually retired, like a sacred object that, once used, could not simply be abandoned, but had to be laid to rest with honor. This cyclical building and burying may indicate a tradition spanning centuries, perhaps millennia, a sustained cultural practice passed down through generations. But what kind of culture could maintain such a tradition over such long periods without the support structures of an established civilization? The idea seems impossible, yet the evidence is right there in the soil. Consider, too, the carvings adorning the pillars: foxes with elongated bodies, snakes slithering horizontally across limestone, vultures standing tall and ominous. These images are not random depictions of wildlife. They are symbolic. They suggest a worldview deeply rooted in observing and interpreting the natural environment. Some symbols repeat across different pillars and enclosures, hinting at a coded language of meaning understood by all who visited the site. The consistency of these symbols implies a shared mythology, an oral tradition that must have been incredibly strong, robust, and widespread. To carry symbolic knowledge across hundreds of kilometers and countless generations requires more than simple storytelling. It requires rituals, performance, cultural memory. It requires leaders, guides, and ceremonial specialists. And this, once again, pushes us toward the unavoidable conclusion that the world of the people who built Göbekli Tepe was far more complex than we have assumed. There is also the matter of the craftsmanship itself. To carve limestone pillars weighing several tons requires not only stone tools, but a deep understanding of mechanical advantage, leverage, balance, distribution of weight. People had to coordinate groups to lift and position these stones precisely, with a clear knowledge of how to prevent collapse during construction. They had no metal tools, no wheels, no beasts of burden. Yet they achieved feats comparable in difficulty to projects completed by far more technologically advanced societies thousands of years later. How did they develop the techniques needed to quarry, transport, and erect these massive stones? These are not questions with easy answers. Some suggest experimentation over long periods. Others believe there may have been individuals within the community who specialized in engineering knowledge, passing their expertise through apprenticeship-like systems. This itself implies structure, hierarchy, or at the very least, specialized roles. But perhaps an even bigger mystery lies beneath the ground, just beyond the excavated enclosures. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest that what we have uncovered so far is only a fraction, perhaps less than 5%, of the entire complex. If that is true, Göbekli Tepe is not a single site, but a vast ceremonial landscape stretching across the hillside. A landscape carefully planned, carefully executed, and then carefully hidden beneath deliberate layers of earth. Why would they hide their sacred structures? What purpose did burials serve? Was it a symbolic act, a way of returning the sacred to the earth? Was it meant to seal away knowledge, preserve something for the future, or mark the end of a spiritual cycle? Or, more provocatively, was it to protect the structures from something? The idea that they may have buried these enclosures to shield them, whether from climate change, invaders, or even their own people, introduces yet another layer of complexity. Burial suggests reverence, but it also suggests fear. The question becomes even more complicated when we consider the dating. Göbekli Tepe dates back to around 9600 BCE, emerging right after the end of the last ice age. This was a period marked by dramatic climate instability, flooding, and shifts in ecosystems. Some researchers propose that the trauma of the changing world could have driven people to build sacred spaces, seeking protection or favor from supernatural forces they believed governed the elements. Others suggest that the builders may have been survivors of earlier, now lost cultures that were destroyed by the catastrophic events that ended the Ice Age. If that is true, Göbekli Tepe may not represent the birth of civilization, but its rebirth. This line of thought leads to some of the more speculative but fascinating theories surrounding the site. Some believe it may hold remnants of a forgotten chapter in human history, a chapter erased by time, flood, and fire. They argue that the sudden appearance of advanced architecture at Göbekli Tepe hints at knowledge inherited rather than invented. This does not necessarily imply something supernatural or alien, but rather the existence of earlier human groups who developed complex societies that have yet to be discovered, or that may have been lost entirely due to prehistoric climate cataclysms. Others caution against such assumptions, reminding us that human creativity is powerful and that innovation can arise even under harsh conditions. Yet the questions persist. How did people with no permanent settlements suddenly mobilize the resources needed to construct monumental architecture? Why do so many of the carvings resemble motifs associated with later mythologies from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Anatolia? Is there a thread of continuity in humanity's earliest spiritual expressions stretching across millennia? As excavations continue, each discovery adds new depth to the mystery. Small fragments of animal bones reveal evidence of massive feasting events, suggesting that Göbekli Tepe attracted people from vast distances. Thousands of flint tools scattered across the site indicate large groups working together on construction, carving, and ritual activities. The lack of domestic structures confirms that no one lived here permanently. It was a destination, a gathering place, a ceremonial center unmatched in antiquity. The effort required to sustain such gatherings is staggering. People had to travel long distances, bringing with them food, tools, and offerings. They had to coordinate their movements with seasonal migrations of animals and resources. They had to return repeatedly, generation after generation, to rebuild, expand, and eventually bury their sacred enclosures. This level of commitment implies a shared identity among groups who likely spoke different dialects, came from different regions, and lived under different environmental pressures. Göbekli Tepe may have served as a unifying landmark, a place where wandering tribes came to reinforce their bonds, settle disputes, exchange knowledge, and participate in rituals that reinforced their collective worldview. If this is true, then the site is not just a monument, but a symbol of early social cohesion, a forerunner of culture, law, and spirituality. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe embodies one of the most profound transitions in human history, the shift from surviving to belonging. And belonging requires symbols, powerful ones. The icons carved into the pillars may represent clans, tribes, or cosmological concepts. Snakes could symbolize danger or transformation. Foxes might represent cunning or guardianship. Vultures, often associated with death, may reflect beliefs about the soul's journey. The repetition of these symbols suggests the presence of a shared mythology meaningful enough to last centuries. Yet the absence of script, pottery, or advanced tools complicates our understanding. This is a symbolic language without written words, a cultural expression without cities, a belief system without temples, except the one they built here, carved from the living rock. It raises another question. How much of human culture is invisible in the archaeological record? If these people had songs, rituals, stories, and traditions, none of that survives except through the clues left carved in stone. And those stones tell us something else. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not primitive. They were purposeful, visionary, capable of organizing massive labor forces, capable of interpreting the world symbolically, capable of creating structures that would endure for 12,000 years. They were, in every sense of the word, architects of the impossible. But Göbekli Tepe becomes even more intriguing when we consider its astronomical features. Some researchers suggest that the layout of the enclosures aligns with celestial bodies, perhaps tracking solstices, equinoxes, or star formations meaningful to the builders. The pillars could represent constellations. The site may have functioned not just as a spiritual center, but as an astronomical observatory. If true, this would imply advanced knowledge of the sky thousands of years before the earliest known civilizations developed similar systems. It suggests that the people who built Göbekli Tepe did not merely observe the world around them. They studied it, interpreted it, and embedded their understanding into stone. Whether or not the astronomical theories hold, one thing remains clear. Göbekli Tepe reveals a world far richer, far more complex, and far more mysterious than we once believed. And as we continue to excavate, layer by layer, inch by inch, we uncover not just stones, but stories of a humanity capable of imagination, innovation, and spiritual depth long before the first city rose from the earth. Göbekli Tepe forces us to confront the possibility that our ancestors were not waiting for civilization to show them how to build, how to plan, or how to dream. They were already dreaming. They were already searching for meaning. They were already reaching towards something greater. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is this: they succeeded. As we press further into the story of Göbekli Tepe, its stones, its people, and its mysteries, it is increasingly clear that we are dealing not with a simple monument, but with a profound pivot point in human history. With every pillar unearthed, every carving identified, and every soil layer examined, Göbekli Tepe continues to challenge our assumptions about what early humans were capable of. One of the most compelling developments in recent research concerns the possibility that Göbekli Tepe wasn't only a ritual site, it may also have served as an astronomical observatory. According to a new analysis, markings carved onto one of the central pillars may represent a lunisolar calendar. The team behind this theory suggests that repeated V-shaped symbols correspond to the days of a 365-day year, 12 lunar months, plus 11 extra days. If this interpretation is correct, then Göbekli Tepe's builders were not only artists and ritualists, they were careful observers of the heavens. They may have tracked lunar phases, solar cycles, even seasonal changes, long before any known civilization had invented writing or built permanent cities. Their world would have been one where the rhythms of nature, the cycles of the sky, and the passage of time were deeply sacred. On one particular pillar, known among researchers as the vulture stone, a carving of a bird with spread wings has been interpreted as more than just an animal depiction. Some scholars propose that the sphere above the bird's wing represents the sun, suggesting a symbolic representation of celestial events. If that is so, then Göbekli Tepe may have functioned as a cosmic calendar, a place where humanity first began to map the universe, long before the first organized temples or palaces. This view aligns with other theories connecting Göbekli Tepe's carvings to celestial phenomena. Some researchers argue that certain animals carved onto the pillars, scorpions, foxes, vultures, may correspond to constellations visible at the time of construction. If this was indeed their intention, then the stone circles of Göbekli Tepe were more than symbolic or ritual spaces. They were part of a cosmological map, encoding the movement of stars, the cycles of seasons, and possibly events of great cosmic significance. Perhaps most intriguingly, One scientific proposal suggests that these carvings record a catastrophic meteor or comet event around 10,050 BCE, an impact that may have triggered widespread climate upheaval, the so-called Younger Dryas period. According to this interpretation, Göbekli Tepe's builders memorialized the event in stone, creating a spiritual or mythic response to a trauma that transformed their world. If this line of reasoning holds, then Göbekli Tepe may mark a turning point not only in architecture and ritual, but in human consciousness itself. A moment when our ancestors witnessed cosmic danger, recognized the fragility of life, looked up at the heavens, and carved their fears and hopes into stone. And that brings us to a deeper, more profound question. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe is not just the oldest temple, but the first monument where humanity sought to understand its place in the cosmos, to draw meaning from stars, seasons, life, and death. We must also consider what Göbekli Tepe tells us about the origins of social complexity. The sheer scale of construction, the coordination needed to move and erect massive limestone pillars, the artistry of the carvings, and the possibility of astronomical knowledge. All of it points to a society far more organized and sophisticated than the traditional image of nomadic hunter-gatherers. Indeed, many scholars now believe that the builders were social groups not defined by simple survival, but by shared beliefs, communal purpose, and long-term vision. Curiously, despite all this evidence, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. The enclosures were filled in with earth and debris, sealing them under layers of soil. This burial was not accidental. The builders did not simply abandon the site. They intentionally closed it. Why? There are several theories. Perhaps each enclosure had a defined lifespan. After a generation or ritual cycle, it was sealed and a new one built. Perhaps the burial was part of a spiritual belief, a ritual of closure, or an offering to the earth. Or maybe the shifting climate and changing environment made the site untenable for large gatherings, prompting its closure. Whatever the reason, the act of burial preserved Göbekli Tepe perfectly for millennia, hiding it from human eyes until the modern era. And in that concealment lies a deeper lesson, that the legacy of humanity's earliest spiritual and intellectual achievements can lie buried for ages until someone pays attention. Today, as archaeologists continue to excavate and study the site, only a small fraction, roughly 10%, has been uncovered so far. Ground-penetrating radar and other geophysical surveys hint at many more enclosures hidden beneath the tell. This means that the story of Göbekli Tepe is far from complete. What we see now may be just the visible tip of an incredible prehistoric iceberg. This anticipation, the sense that centuries of human history lie buried, waiting to be rediscovered, adds to the mystique of Göbekli Tepe. Every carved pillar, every hidden chamber, every layer of soil is a page in a lost ancient book, waiting to tell its story. Finally, what does Göbekli Tepe mean for us in the modern world? It stands as a profound reminder that humanity's capacity for spirituality, cooperation, intellect, and long-term vision is ancient. It tells us that long before agriculture, before settled life, before writing, humans were already building, imagining, reaching for meaning. In a time when we often think of progress as technology, comfort, and urbanization, Göbekli Tepe invites us to remember something more fundamental, that civilization is not just a matter of bricks and infrastructure, but of ideas, rituals, shared belief, and the willingness to dream together. And as long as we continue to dig, to research, to question, perhaps we will uncover not only the deeper secrets of Göbekli Tepe, but the deeper truths about ourselves. As we move deeper into the unfolding mystery of Göbekli Tepe, it becomes clear that this site forces us to reconsider not only the timeline of civilization, but the very nature of human intention. For generations, archaeologists believed that monumental architecture required complex social structures, settled farming societies with organized leadership. Yet here, on this windswept hillside in southeastern Turkey, 12,000 years ago, a very different story was being written. Instead of agriculture leading to monument building may have led to agriculture. Instead of cities giving rise to temples, a temple-like monument may have given rise to the first seeds of civilization. This reversal of cause and effect is not just a historical correction. It is a fundamental shift in how we understand human ingenuity. Because if hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe, then these weren't small, scattered bands living a life of simple survival. These were people with shared purpose, shared vision, and the ability to mobilize labor on a scale once thought impossible for nomadic groups. They were capable not only of cooperation, but of inspiration, the kind of inspiration that compels hundreds of people to lift stones weighing tons, carve pillars taller than themselves, and decorate them with symbols whose meanings are still beyond our grasp. This raises a deeper question. What belief system could have driven such extraordinary effort? 12,000 years ago, life was fragile. The world had only recently emerged from the devastating cold of the last ice age. Wild animals roamed the plains. Seasonal migrations shaped human life. And yet, in this unpredictable world, these people found time and purpose to build something astonishing. Perhaps Göbekli Tepe was a place of pilgrimage. Perhaps clans separated by hundreds of kilometers convened here in great gatherings, carrying with them small gifts, carved tools, stories, and traditions. They may have brought with them bones from animals hunted in distant regions, obsidian tools crafted from volcanic stone found miles away, or seeds of wild cereals collected along their travels. Each gathering might have been a celebration, a ritual, an exchange of cultures. And in this great social convergence, the foundation of something new was being formed: unity, cooperation, and shared identity. It is possible, even likely, that Göbekli Tepe served as a cultural anchor in a world without borders, a landmark of meaning for people who wandered but did not drift aimlessly. And for these early humans, meaning was everything. Their survival depended not only on physical agility and practical knowledge, but on the belief systems that helped them interpret their environment, face their fears, and explain the mysteries of life and death. This significance is even clearer when we examine the pillars. Some are simply decorated with geometric patterns, but others bear vivid depictions of animals, creatures both feared and revered. Foxes with elongated bodies, snakes slithering across the stone, wild boars frozen mid-stride, vultures with outstretched wings, perhaps representing the transition between life and death. These are not random carvings. They are deliberate, consistent, symbolic. They reveal a worldview where animals were not just prey or predators, they were messengers, guardians, spirits, or cosmological symbols. One pillar in particular, often called Pillar 18, is striking in its detail. A towering T-shaped monolith It features carvings of animals stacked vertically, almost like a narrative unfolding from bottom to top. Some researchers believe this may represent a creation myth or a story known to all who visited the site. The people gathered here may have stood before these pillars, listening to elders recite tales of how the world was formed, how the stars came to be, or how humans first emerged from the earth. Storytelling, ritual, and symbol all converged in this sacred place. Yet for all its beauty, Göbekli Tepe also carries an air of enigma. Because after centuries, perhaps even a millennium of use, the builders made an extraordinary decision. They buried it, not in a quick collapse or accidental covering, but in a deliberate and labor-intensive process. Stones were packed into the enclosures. Soil and debris were layered over the pillars. Entire structures were entombed. This process required as much effort as constructing the site in the first place. The people who built this place cared deeply, not only about its creation, but about its closure. Why bury something so monumental? Why seal their greatest achievement beneath the earth? Perhaps the answers lie in the landscape itself. As the climate warmed after the Ice Age, the land changed. Forests expanded in some areas and vanished in others. Rivers shifted. Animal migrations altered. The world these people knew was transforming. Their rituals may have changed as well. New beliefs may have emerged. New stories, new needs. It is possible that Göbekli Tepe represented an era, a sacred age, and when that age ended, they closed the chapter with ritual finality. Each enclosure may have served its purpose for a generation or two before being filled and sealed. A cycle of creation and burial, birth and death, emergence and return. And in this cycle, we see the beginnings of human concepts that would later shape religion, philosophy, and myth. The idea that sacred things have life cycles, that spiritual places must be renewed, that nothing earthly is permanent. The act of burial also preserved the site in remarkable condition. It protected the pillars from erosion and allowed the carvings to survive intact for 12 millennia. It kept the stone circles hidden from later human settlements. It ensured that when the modern world finally rediscovered Göbekli Tepe, it would emerge from the soil almost as the builders left it. This preservation has given archaeologists a rare opportunity, a portal into the minds and hearts of people who lived at the dawn of human imagination. But as much as we have uncovered, the majority of Göbekli Tepe remains hidden. Beneath the earth lie dozens more enclosures, perhaps hundreds of carved pillars still untouched. What stories do they hold? What symbols? What ancient knowledge? It is entirely possible that the most important discoveries have not yet been made. And then there is the matter of the people themselves, the builders. Who were they? What did they look like? What language did they speak? What songs did they sing? Their bones have not been found at the site. No burials, no human remains. This suggests that no one lived here, no one died here. This was not a settlement. It was a sacred destination. Yet artifacts found nearby reveal traces of their lives. Flint tools, stone bowls, fragments of bone from wild animals. The remains of feasts, perhaps. Massive feasts, evidence of gatherings much larger than any simple clan. These gatherings were celebrations of unity, of ritual, of purpose. We may picture them, hundreds of people approaching the hilltop, carrying torches, drums echoing across the valley, symbols painted on their bodies, offerings of food, animal skins, or carved talismans, elders guiding the ceremonies, children watching in awe as myths were brought to life through movement, sound, and stone. Such a world is distant to us now, yet Göbekli Tepe brings it achingly close. These were not anonymous ancient humans living in obscurity. They were thinkers, dreamers, artists, architects. They possessed skills we had believed belonged only to much later societies. Göbekli Tepe forces us to confront the possibility that the human mind, capable of abstract thought, symbolic expression, complex planning, emerged long before civilization as we traditionally define it. The ambition to build, to express, to create meaning did not wait for cities or farming. It was already alive, already burning, already pushing our ancestors to carve their visions into the earth. And this is perhaps the greatest revelation of all, that the story of civilization is not a straight line from primitive to advanced. It is a tapestry woven in complexity, full of leaps, pauses, and forgotten chapters. Göbekli Tepe is one of those chapters, a chapter that survived against all odds for us to rediscover. And every stone whispers the same message. Humanity has always been capable of greatness. And so, as the ancient sun rose and set over the limestone pillars of Göbekli Tepe, its builders continued their work, not for decades, but for centuries. Even this fact alone rewrites what we thought we knew. Because to commit generations of labor to a single symbolic project means the people behind it were not merely surviving. They were planning. They were imagining a future beyond their own lifetimes. They were preserving a worldview, passing down a tradition, and teaching the next generation to lift stones they themselves might never see completed. Culture, not agriculture, appears to be the force that drove them, and that reverses the logic of everything archaeologists once believed. For so long, we assumed religion, myth, and monument building came after food security. But at Göbekli Tepe, the evidence suggests the opposite. The shared need to gather, to worship, to mark seasons and cosmic cycles may have demanded a more stable food supply. It may have encouraged these early humans to experiment with planting wild seeds simply to support the workers and pilgrims who came here. In other words, belief may have created farming, not the other way around. This site stands as evidence that ideas, stories, and spiritual yearning have always been powerful engines of human progress. The desire to understand the world, to unite communities, and to express what could not be spoken may have been stronger than hunger itself. And if that is true, then Göbekli Tepe becomes more than a mysterious ancient structure. It becomes the birthplace of the human mind as we know it. Imagine the gatherings here, torches flickering, silhouettes of carved animals dancing along the pillars, the smell of cooked grains and roasted meat rising from communal fires, people arriving from distant valleys, bringing gifts, stories, songs, and news of changing weather. Imagine rituals held under starlit skies, where constellations were not just patterns, but gods, ancestors, or cosmic animals watching over the living. Perhaps they told stories of creation, how the world began, and how it would someday end. Perhaps they traced the arc of the seasons, explaining the death of winter and the rebirth of spring. Perhaps they asked the same questions we still ask today. Who made us? Why are we here? What happens when we die? In this light, Göbekli Tepe becomes humanity's first great classroom, a place where knowledge was shared, preserved, and performed. And the carvings become textbooks, echoing lessons older than written language. But with every answer comes a deeper puzzle, because for all its grandeur, the site was eventually buried, intentionally, not destroyed, not decayed, but covered meticulously with thousands of tons of rubble. Why would anyone bury a temple that took centuries to build? Some theories suggest a shift in the climate, a change so dramatic that the world these people knew could not be sustained. Others propose a cultural transformation, a new belief system, or the rise of agriculture demanding a different kind of communal life. There are even those who think the burial itself was a ritual, a ceremonial ending, marking the close of an age. Whatever the reason, the act was deliberate, and deliberate acts always carry meaning. The burial preserved the site so well that 12,000 years later, it feels almost as if the builders wanted us, the people of the distant future, to find it, to uncover their message, to ask the same questions they once asked under the cold Anatolian stars, questions about beginnings, questions about identity, questions about what it means to be human. Göbekli Tepe is a story written without ink, carved instead into stone, encoded in alignments, and whispered through symbols whose meanings we are still trying to decode. And the more we uncover, the more the story expands. Why are some pillars anthropomorphic, with carved hands folded across their midsections as if representing deities or ancestors? Why do certain enclosures align with astronomical events, suggesting a knowledge of the heavens far older than expected? Why do we find no signs of permanent settlement, no pottery, no farming tools, and no domestic structures nearby? It's as though the site was a stage built solely for celestial rituals, a place where the earth met the sky and humans found their place between them. And yet this story carries an eerie echo, because Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across the world, other ancient megalithic sites emerge from prehistory with levels of complexity we once thought impossible for hunter-gatherers. Stonehenge, Nabta Playa, the stone circles of Gobero, the megalithic temples of Malta. Each of these structures suggests a similar pattern, that long before writing, before farming, before bronze, or wheels, or cities, early people were gathering together and building massive ceremonial sites. Perhaps this was not an anomaly. Perhaps this was the rule, and history simply forgot it. Civilization may not have begun with small farming villages that slowly evolved into cities. It may have begun with sacred places that brought people together, and only then did shared living emerge. Göbekli Tepe becomes the missing chapter, the bridge between the world of wandering tribes and the birth of settled society. It's a reminder that our ancestors were not primitive, but deeply intelligent, imaginative, and remarkably organized. They understood stone, astronomy, seasons, migration patterns, and symbolism. They understood what binds people together: shared stories, shared rituals, and shared purpose. Even today, those are the foundations of every culture on Earth. But the most astonishing question remains: who taught them to build like this? If humans had no prior experience with architecture, then Göbekli Tepe represents a technological leap far too sudden to explain by gradual progress alone. It's like discovering a computer built by people who should still be learning how to make fire. Some archaeologists argue that knowledge may have been passed from an earlier unknown culture, a lost chapter of humanity washed away by the Ice Age. Others propose that the end of the glacial period unleashed a flood of innovations as populations surged and climates stabilized. And then there are those who believe the answer lies in the sky, that celestial phenomena, meteor strikes, and cosmic cycles pushed early humans to seek a deeper connection with the universe, inspiring symbols and structures that mirrored the heavens. Whatever the truth, Göbekli Tepe remains the earliest, undeniable monument of intention. A message carved in stone by people who refused to be forgotten. And now, more than 12 millennia later, we are finally listening. As archaeologists clear away more of the protective soil that covered Göbekli Tepe, they uncover not only new stones, but new contradictions that challenge everything we thought we understood about humanity's earliest chapters. Each pillar, each enclosure, each carving reveals another layer of intentionality, another hint that these ancient builders were operating with a worldview far more complex than mere survival. And as each chamber emerges from the earth, one thing becomes increasingly clear. None of this was random. None of it was improvised. This was a project of architecture, of cosmology, and of collective will. It required an understanding of stability, weight distribution, geometry, and artistic precision that seems to appear out of nowhere, as if a switch was suddenly flipped in the human mind. But evolution doesn't flip switches. It moves slowly, gradually, incrementally. And yet here, buried in the hills of southeastern Turkey, is something that looks like a quantum leap, a burst of creativity and organization that defies every neat timeline drawn in school textbooks. Many believe this leap was not accidental. Something must have triggered it, a memory carried through generations, perhaps, or knowledge inherited from a people whose existence has been forgotten. And as the Ice Age ended, as glaciers receded and temperatures rose, old landscapes vanished. Entire coastlines were swallowed by rising seas. If an earlier culture existed, one capable of passing down ideas about building, design, or the stars, its cities may now rest beneath hundreds of feet of ocean. That possibility lingers at the edges of the Göbekli Tepe mystery. But we do not need speculation to appreciate the brilliance of what remains. Walk deeper into the structures in your imagination, and you will find pillars arranged with ceremonial meaning. Notice how some enclosures form near-perfect circles, their stones facing inward like guardians of an inner sanctum. At the center, two towering T-shaped monoliths stand taller than the rest, symbols of power, spirituality, or ancestral presence. The carvings on them depict no casual artwork. They represent animals known intimately by the people who roam this land. Foxes, boars, vultures, snakes, scorpions, lions. These animals were not chosen randomly. They were chosen because they meant something. Some may represent seasons. Others may symbolize clans. Others may be guardians of ritual knowledge or mythic figures woven into early storytelling traditions. In these carvings lies a language without letters, a visual system meant to encode meaning so that it could outlive the people who created it. And it has. For 12,000 years, these silent monoliths have stood, waiting patiently for humanity to rediscover them. But what strikes many researchers is not only the artistic detail, but the consistency. The symbols do not vary wildly. The style remains uniform. The shapes and proportions of the pillars follow a recognizable pattern. This suggests the existence of some kind of teaching, a system of passing knowledge from master to apprentice, from generation to generation. It means the people behind Göbekli Tepe didn't merely discover architecture, they refined it. Structures this advanced require more than imagination. They require planning, templates, systems of measurement, coordination, leadership, a shared vision, not only of what should be built, but of why it should be built. And that why is still the greatest mystery. Some believe Göbekli Tepe was a temple of the dead, a place where departed souls were guided into the next world. Evidence of vulture imagery supports this idea, since ancient cultures often associated vultures with sky burials and the soul's ascent. Others argue it was a sanctuary where people gathered to honor deities or celestial beings. The placement of certain stones hints at astronomical alignment, suggesting ancient sky-watching rituals. Perhaps the enclosures acted as calendars, tracking solstices or the movement of specific stars that marked seasons crucial for hunting and gathering. And then there are those who view Göbekli Tepe as a center of unification, a neutral ground where different tribes converge to share stories, resources, marriages, and ceremonies that strengthened alliances. In this view, the architecture itself becomes a symbol of cooperation, representing the moment humanity learned to build not just structures but societies. No theory yet explains everything, but every theory agrees on one point. Göbekli Tepe changed humanity. Once people gathered here, once they organized themselves around rituals and collective purpose, the idea of living together took root. Villages formed, farming emerged, social roles diversified. The seeds of civilization were planted, not in soil, but in symbolism. This site tells us that long before humans learned to write words, they learned to write meaning. Before they learned to build cities, they learned to build sacred spaces. Before they formed governments, they formed communities of belief. Göbekli Tepe may represent the very first moment humanity realized it shared a destiny. Yet, even in its brilliance, the site preserves an unsettling question. Why did its builders walk away? Imagine the last days of Göbekli Tepe. The fires dim, the gatherings fade, the ceremonies no longer echo across the stones. The people who once carried monoliths abandon the practice. And then begins the burial. Slow, deliberate, ritualistic. Stone after stone, chamber after chamber, they fill the enclosures with debris. They do not topple the pillars. They protect them. They hide them beneath layers of earth and rubble, as though sealing away something sacred or dangerous. Was it respect? Was it fear? Was it a symbolic ending of a worldview no longer compatible with the changing world? Whatever the reason, the act was not one of destruction. It was preservation. And that alone suggests awareness. The awareness that knowledge can outlast those who carry it. Perhaps they understood that cycles of growth and decline were part of humanity's path. Perhaps they believed someone, someday, would return and uncover their work. If so, we are the people they were waiting for. The unearthing of Göbekli Tepe is not just an archaeological discovery, it is a conversation across 12,000 years. It is the moment two distant civilizations, theirs and ours, finally meet. Their questions become our questions. Their symbols become our puzzles. Their achievements become our inheritance. And as we continue excavating the remaining 90% of the site still buried beneath the hillside, we prepare ourselves for even more revelations. Revelations that may not only challenge the story of civilization, but rewrite it entirely. We may discover new chambers with carvings unseen since the dawn of humanity, new symbols that alter our understanding of ancient belief, evidence of rituals that reshape the timelines of human development. Or, perhaps, buried deepest of all, lies a clue to the origin of the knowledge that created Göbekli Tepe. A whisper from a forgotten world. What we know for certain is this: the ground beneath our feet still holds secrets, and Göbekli Tepe is only the beginning. As the mystery deepens, Göbekli Tepe becomes more than an archaeological puzzle. It becomes a mirror, reflecting back to us the parts of humanity we often overlook: curiosity, imagination, and the instinct to create meaning out of the chaos of existence. These early builders were not merely carving animals into stone. They were carving identity, carving memory, carving presence. They were announcing to the world and to the future that they were here and that their thoughts mattered. The more we examine the pillars, the more it becomes clear that these stones were never meant to exist in isolation. Their true power emerges when seen as a network, a web of symbolic communication that connected people spread across vast distances. The same foxes, serpents, vultures, and scorpions appear on artifacts found miles away, suggesting that the symbolism of Göbekli Tepe was shared, understood, and revered far beyond the hill where the pillars stand. This was not a local shrine. This was a cultural epicenter. People did not stumble upon it by chance. They journeyed here. They sought this place out, just as people today journey to holy sites, sacred mountains, or ancient temples. And the act of gathering itself transformed them. When hundreds of people come together with a shared purpose, the very structure of society begins to change. Leadership emerges, roles form, traditions solidify, stories become lineages. And perhaps, in one of these gatherings, someone first suggested planting wild wheat instead of simply collecting it. Perhaps food storage began as a necessity to feed the crowds attending rituals here. Perhaps the first sparks of agriculture were lit by the flames of ceremony. If that is true, then Göbekli Tepe did not simply mark the beginning of civilization. Göbekli Tepe created civilization. But even beyond agriculture, this place may have shaped the way we tell stories, the way we mark time, the way we interpret the sky. Many researchers now believe that ancient people used the enclosure layouts as a kind of cosmic map, a reflection of constellations above. The animals carved on the pillars could represent star patterns known to prehistoric astronomers. These carvings may be among the earliest attempts to record cosmic events, migrations, seasons, or even disasters witnessed in the night sky. It suggests that humanity's first science was not mathematics or chemistry, but cosmology, the attempt to understand our place in the universe. And the people of Göbekli Tepe pursued that knowledge with a passion that would echo into every future civilization. You can see their legacy in the pyramids of Egypt, aligned with celestial events. You can see it in Stonehenge, marking solstices. You can see it in the ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia, built as stairways to the heavens. And you can see it in the modern world whenever we look through telescopes, launch satellites, or search for meaning in the stars. All of it can be traced back to the human desire expressed here, the desire to connect the realm of the earth with the realm of the sky. But if Göbekli Tepe was so important, why was it ultimately buried? Why cover something so magnificent, so symbolic, so central to early human identity? Perhaps it was not abandonment at all. Perhaps it was transition. Cultures evolve. Beliefs shift. As people developed stability through farming and village life, their needs changed, their rituals changed, their symbolic centers changed. They kept their stories, but built new temples, new shrines, new traditions. And so, with respect, the old was closed, entombed not out of rejection, but out of reverence, sealed beneath the earth, like a memory too sacred to erase. The burial preserved the pillars perfectly, giving us the rare opportunity to see the world through the eyes of a culture that stood at the crossroads between the hunter-gatherer life and the dawn of civilization. And this is where the true power of Göbekli Tepe lies. It is not just a monument of stone. It is a monument of transition. It captures the exact moment when humans decided to step out of nature and begin shaping it intentionally. The moment when survival was no longer enough, and meaning, identity, spirituality, and community became just as essential as food and shelter. Göbekli Tepe is the spark at the beginning of the long fuse of human history, a fuse that leads to every city, every nation, every invention, and every story we tell today. And as the last layers of earth are removed, and the pillars finally see daylight again, after 12,000 years, the site calls out to us, asking us not only to observe what was, but to question what comes next. Because if the people of Göbekli Tepe could achieve this at the very dawn of human society, then what are the limits of our own potential? Their stones endure. Their symbols endure. Their memory endures. And whether they intended it or not, their message is clear. Humanity has always been capable of greatness. And so, when we look upon Göbekli Tepe today, we are not looking at ruins. We are looking at beginnings. At the first lines of a story, humanity is still writing. At the spark that ignited everything that would follow: farming, language, architecture, astronomy, and civilization itself. What these ancient pillars teach us is simple yet profound: that our ancestors were far more intelligent, far more organized, and far more creative than history ever gave them credit for. That meaning matters, ritual matters, community matters, and that even 12,000 years ago, humans stood beneath the same sky we see today, asking the same questions we still ask. Göbekli Tepe should not exist according to our old understanding of history, and yet it does. Its very existence is a reminder that we still have much to learn, much to uncover, and much to rethink. And if this journey into humanity's ancient past has opened your imagination, if it made you wonder what else might be buried beneath the sands of time, then you're exactly the kind of explorer this channel was made for. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. Join us as we uncover the forgotten chapters of our world, dive into the mysteries of ancient civilizations, and travel deeper into the stories humanity left behind. Like the builders of Göbekli Tepe, we're carving meaning together, one discovery at a time. Thank you for watching. And until the next journey, keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your sense of wonder alive. Subscribe now and step with us into the ages past.